Call the special regular meeting of Council of May the 4th to order and ask for a motion, please, to adopt the agenda. Councilors Adey and Randhawa. Any discussion, additions, deletions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Time for public comments, but we have no public in the room. Bylaws, introduction of bylaw number 2023 5-year financial plan, bylaw number 3517, with the recommendation that council introduces, gives first, second, and third readings to the City of Prince Rupert 2023 5-year financial plan, bylaw number 3517 2023. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Niche and Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion at this point in time? Councillor Cunningham. Can you use your microphone, please?
With the amendment we just got about borrowing money and to have the 40 million so we can put in for it, what impact is that going to have? I just got it today.
Yep. No, absolutely. Dr. Buchan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess just by way of background, we were initially contemplating that the city share would be closer to 70 million, but borrowing capacity has tailored that down. And 45 million is in total. It's 40 plus plus the 5 million for design. That is a significant amount. And Director Bompton will be able to tell you what the actual impact would be on those numbers, but I just want to say in advance of that we are going to be committed to working as hard as we can to make sure that we're not having the utilities fund that full amount. We're thinking that we are going to have a goal of it being able to raise revenues or other funds to make up the difference between 30 million and 45 million. So we're contemplating actually borrowing around 30 million. Now we need to have the full amount identified because we're going to have to justify our grant request to the federal government. And so that's the long and the short of it. In terms of what 45 million would be, Director Bauman can answer that, and perhaps maybe even 30 million. I'm not sure if you have those numbers. I guess not.
Director Bauman.
So this bylaw is for 3 readings, and it brings in the full expenditures for all the works over the next 3 years, because it contemplates what is planned for the next 5 years. The bylaw for borrowing will be brought forward on Monday. It actually will have the information that Councillor Cunningham is asking for, and then shows what the worst case scenario is for ratepayers. As Dr. Buchan has mentioned, if we were to borrow and have the utility ratepayers paying for the whole thing, then that amount will be there. But staff intends to only borrow in stages in accordance with the works that will be done over the 3 years, which is in the 5-year financial plan, in which case then we have time to be able to try and get other sources of revenue so that we don't have to either do all the borrowing, or at least the other sources of revenue can contribute towards the debt servicing. So that information will actually come forward on Monday. There still needs to be a borrowing process that is conducted. It takes 6 months. It does not mean that if you adopt the financial plan now that you are committing to borrowing, because there still has to be an approval process. Right. This just includes the works in the 5-year financial plan is being contemplated, and the funding sources can flow after that. And if we can't get the funding, then we have to scale back.
Right.
So 2 points. One, would we be better off hiring a full-time engineer rather than spending $5 million on money that's just going to go south, west, east, or anywhere but stay here? Because that's a lot of money for engineering, and I'm quite sure we could hire an engineer for more than 6 months for $5 million.
Your worship, my understanding is no, we wouldn't, but I want to defer that to Director Pucci.
Director Pucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the $5 million is for design and asset management. There's a whole bunch of things that's wrapped into that for the project. There are several different disciplines associated with doing this work. There's geotechnical engineering, there's water analysis, there's sewer analysis, there's all sorts of things, there's sizing components, and no real one engineer can tackle this whole project on their own. Plus, there's design drawings that need to be made, and all the way from 30%, 50%, 70% IFC drawings. There's equipment, there's survey, there's just a whole bunch of things that goes into this. So really, a design house, like a larger consulting company, has all of those attributes built into the company. So you go out to an RFP, you approve a design house to do it, and then within their organization, they have all those specialists there to lean on to create a drawing set for us. So the number of 5 million is to tackle everything required associated with the 26.2 kilometers, and that is also bundled in for water analysis, things of that nature. So it's not just to engineering and a little bit of design work. It's really just a full meal deal there.
Councillor Cunningham, you had a second question.
So, well, on that first question, so if we go and spend $5 million and can't get the funding or grants for the rest of it, where does that leave that funding then? Does it become passe if we, in a couple of years, and it has to be redone?
Director Pucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I mean, the idea is that we would keep all of those designs ready to go. If we do not reach the goal of the 26.2 kilometers, those corridors still need to be done. And having designs shelf ready means that we can go to the funders and say, we want to do this street or this corridor, and we have a design, and here it is, and this is the cost of it, and we're ready to build. So I think that having it all done ready, hopefully we can get through the whole program. That's what we anticipate today. But as we get into it, we might not make every meter of that, but we are going to try, and we are going to design for the whole thing, because all of it is in failure state. So it all needs to be designed and redone. Thank you.
Councillor
Okay,
Cunningham.
the second part of that is you're asking us to give first, second, third reading to a budget that can change by Monday, and the impact on utilities.
Councillor Cunningham, I encourage you to direct your
Okay.
question to me.
I was looking at Councillor Bond.
I know it's really hard. I appreciate that.
So you're asking us to pass a budget today for second, third reading with sort of a variable for coming back on Monday for fourth reading. Is that correct?
No, Dr. Buchan or
Director Bombin, please.
Director Bombin.
No, there's no variable in the 5-year financial plan itself. Basically, the other bylaws that I was referring to are the borrowing bylaws, which will be 6 months worth of getting approval. But the 5-year financial plan itself sets what council is basically directing staff to do as works. The 2023 has not changed. It's the 2024 and 2025. All of it has been contemplated. That doesn't mean that it's going to actually proceed. That is the same for every 5-year financial plan. The years after the immediate year can actually change by the time we actually get to next year as well. But we have to do a 5-year financial plan within the community charter. We know that we have 26.2 kilometers of critical infrastructure that needs to be replaced. And since that critical infrastructure needs to be replaced within the 5-year financial plan, we've been told that we need to actually put it in place in order also to be able to qualify for grants. We have to show that council is committed to doing the work. It doesn't mean that council is committed to funding it exactly the same way as is contemplated presently, especially if we can get other sources of revenue, and then we can amend the financial plan, or next year we have a better understanding of how it will be funded.
So basically,
Councillor, I'm going to go to other councillors just for Okay, one qualifying question, and
Yeah,
I'll just make sure.
So
nobody else has questions.
basically, it won't have any impact on the budget, but it could have a large impact on utilities next year if, worst case scenario, we have to finance the whole thing.
I think that would be accurate, Director Bombin.
Yes, but as mentioned, we're talking about possibly borrowing in stages, which matches the actual works every single year. So we'll have a borrowing authorization up to a certain amount, which is, in this case, is $40 million. That does not mean that we are going to take out $40 million right away. We would only take out in stages. And that also means that we could go ahead and maybe capitalize on better interest rates and match up funding with when works will be done. So we would be breaking it up. And it also means that we could have opportunities for other sources of revenue, should they come, to not go ahead and take on more debt, even though we're authorized to go, possibly, if it's approved, up to $40 million, for instance. There, you can actually withdraw the full authorization by doing an amendment bylaw to bring the authorization down.
All right. Does
I know
anybody
this
else?
infrastructure has to be done and everything, but it just, I'd hate to see the utilities that are already high go higher. You know, that's my concern, and that's next year. We're burdening the taxpayer now with a 12 point something increase, and then going to hit them with a double whammy next year with utility rates going up. And I'm a little queasy about that one.
Any other member of council with questions or comments? Councillor Randhawa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, like my understanding is like 40 million is the cap, right?
Correct.
And if we see, let's say next year or next few years, we get more tenants at Watson Land or Triple Four Law, right? We get 20 million from there, let's
Correct.
say. Then we need only 20 million, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. 40 is the max. I'll let other councillors jump if you have questions or comments, and then I'll kind of summarize if I can. Councillor Forster is joining us from a foreign land. And Councillor, have you got any questions or comments?
No, I think the dialogue from Councillor Cunningham helped clarify some of my questions.
Okay, thank you. I want to, the reason I recognize that she's calling in from a foreign land is she's enjoying personal time and yet is committed enough to, at an ungodly hour of the evening, where she is, phone in to participate as part of the council. And I think that's worth noting. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, so to be clear, or hopefully to be clear, the authorization in this, which doesn't authorize the actual borrowing, that has to be done in a separate process, but anticipates a borrowing of up to $40 million in order to show other levels of government that we're prepared to put our money up that we need to do to match their money if they put their money forward. But the hope is that this is sort of plan C or D or E, that we get an RBA, that we get other grant money, that we, because you think about staging it over 3 years of construction, and let's just pick a number for an RBA of say $8 million, that would bring it down twice in the first year and the second year. And so that could knock 16 million off of 40, right? And so there are other avenues to bring it down. But if we were to, and council has every right to do it. I don't want to suggest that there's no opportunity to do it. But if we bring it down, we need to understand that we are putting in jeopardy the other grant money that we're currently pursuing. The federal money that we're currently pursuing would be contingent on us demonstrating an intention and an ability to provide those matching funds in our 5-year plan, right? In our 5-year plan. Is that clear? I think that those are great questions to raise. I think council has a right to be cautious about that kind of borrowing. You'd be irresponsible not to be. But I think that it's also fair to say that in approving it, there are many, many off-roads before we would get to borrowing that money, and many, many departure points at which council could make another decision. You know, for example, if we don't get the federal grant, we aren't obliged to borrow anything. You might be talking about a different process, but Councillor Adey.
Just on that note, it seems to me that ultimately there is one other way to bring it down, and it's probably the most, the worst of the ways, and that is to simply declare that we can't do this work.
Correct.
So maybe in the form of a question through you, what would be the impact on our big picture with regard to infrastructure if we found ourselves in a position to not be able to do 26 kilometers, to have to cherry pick, you know, the most critical portions and leave it at that? I don't think that's what we're aiming at.
Correct.
But I would suggest that, you know, that's the other kind of end point that you could find yourself at. So I'm interested in the impact of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very fair question, comment. Dr. Buchan.
Your worship, I would suggest that there's quite a number of consequences that could fall from essentially leaving our infrastructure in a state of failure. In the state of failure for the water infrastructure, the outcome is basically we lose our water system. That's the risk that we face in not addressing this. But we may also drive away investment because there's no confidence that the city is looking after its assets. We may lose the confidence of the funding authorities in that we're not prepared to step up for our share. We could lose the system, which would potential a system-wide cavitation of our water distribution system would be catastrophic. That's what we must avoid.
Right. But I think it's reasonable to say, you know, 63 million that we currently have, without at this point in a requirement for matching dollars, could get us a long way down the road if we realized, say by September, October, there just isn't, let's just say we realize, no, we're on our own, there's no other sources of funding coming, that's all there is. I think there's opportunity to adjust that plan, that so we still get into the ground, still get the critical pieces done, but without any of the other extras. We'd be replacing water pipe and water pipe only.
Yeah, but it would leave 2/3 of the system, 2/3 of the critical part of the system unrepaired,
right,
and precarious, and subject to, you know, the cavitation that we're trying to avoid.
Right.
So we would get some done that would reduce the risk by some measure, but it would not eliminate it. And, you know, following on this 26 kilometers, there will be additional kilometers that are, you know, between 5 and 10 years away from having to be dealt with.
Yeah.
So you know, we are laser focused, as we've said, on increasing the other sources of revenues, new revenues, so that the burden of this does not fall on taxpayer through property taxes or utilities.
Yeah. All right. Councillor Cunningham.
In a worst case scenario, we go through with all this, how much will utilities go up?
Oh, wow. Dr. Buchan.
We'll have that information on Monday.
Yeah.
And the council's not voting on the borrowing at this point. It's just the expenditure plan.
Yeah.
And it's not something that commits you to spend. It simply says this is the plan, and council has the capacity to amend it as it wills.
Right. All right. Any questions? Any further questions? All in favor? Any opposed? That was in favor. Yeah. Any opposed? It passes. Thank you very much. We now move on to the report from the Chief Financial Officer with regards to property tax, with a recommendation that Council introduces and gives first, second, third reading to the 2023 property tax bylaw 3518-2023. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Niche, Councillor Cunningham. Questions or discussion? We've had robust discussions leading up to this point, and councillors certainly authorized in the last meeting the increase of 12.5%. If there are no further comments or questions, I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Randhawa is opposed. Item 5, reports, questions, inquiries from members of council. I will just tell you right now that I was in Victoria. I think, as you know, I went with the RBA co-chairs, and just in case people are interested, that travel is funded not by the citizens of Prince Rupert, but rather through a grant that the province gave to assist us in developing the RBA. And I'll report to you more fully at another time, but I think I can say that it was hopeful. It would be the way to describe it. That the Premier suggested, really committed to the notion that the RBA is something he'd like to have in next year's budget, and so and it was also stated by one of the ministers present that that the timeline that people are currently working on would not preclude that. And so, you know, I perhaps you can hear in my voice, I'm not trying to overcommit anybody. I'm not ready to sing praises yet, but it was certainly positive. There was no roadblock in that conversation. And so what we were able to convey is the sense of urgency that we're the co-chairs on behalf of all of the 21 municipality or local government representatives are very worried that as time is ticking by, we'll miss the window to get it into the 2024 budget. And so we were there to put some pressure on to make sure that the process continues. Any other comments or questions from council? Yeah, Councillor Cunningham.
How long is the stairs and pathway from 4th East down to 3rd, or 4th West down to 3rd West going to be closed? Because that's a major thoroughfare for a lot of the people coming from different parts of town that are walking, coming down there to 3rd Avenue. And there's a considerable amount of older people living up in that area too that walk downtown all the time, and now they've got to go down through Service Park, or they're actually driving and creating more of a parking problem.
Yeah. No, fair comment. Dr. Buchan?
Can I refer that to
Absolutely. Director Pucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at this point, we don't have a timeline to open it up. We simply in the budget don't have the funds to be able to do the geotechnical assessment. I think we are doing some minor tree clearing in there just to safeten up the area and secure the slope. We believe that once a geotechnical assessment is done and they look at the damage, that it's going to be a far larger project than anyone really believes, because there is some issues with the pathway. So I think that it's actually quite a bigger job than a lot of people think it is, and we just don't simply have the funds to do it right now. Thank you.
Having said that, I know that there are efforts underway to explore whatever grants or whatever might be available for that. You know, I think there's, I don't even know the names of them, but you know, there's the ones that encourage movement and healthy living. Go ahead, Dr. Buchan.
Active transportation.
Active transportation. So what might be bike lanes in other communities are probably these thoroughfares that are important connectors in our community. So I know staff is working on it, but fair question and a real concern. Oh, Councillor Forster.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question. I know the RBA stands for Resource Benefit Alliance, but I've had a lot of people in our community note that we use a lot of acronyms in our meetings.
Yeah, thank you.
Have we ever thought about putting something on the website that tells people what these things mean?
That's a fair comment, and it's really two parts there. I think you're right. Maybe a glossary of terms would not be a bad idea to have located somewhere. But so for the sake of those listening that are interested, the RBA is the Resource Benefit Alliance. It is comprised of the 3 regional districts. Our regional district, North Coast, Skeena, Kitimat-Stikine Regional District, and Bulkley-Nechako. And each of the municipalities and electoral area reps formed that organization. It was constituted in 2014, so it shows how long these processes can take, with the notion of mimicking what is broadly known as the Fair Share Agreement, which is in place up in the Peace. Up in the Peace River area, a portion of the provincial revenues that are earned in the area are returned to the municipalities. A portion of the revenues that are earned by the provincial government are returned to the municipalities to help them run the municipalities, understanding that activities like forestry and mining and drilling for oil and gas in the case of the Peace, but many of these other activities take place outside of municipal boundaries where they can't be taxed, but place huge burdens on the municipalities. That's where the traffic comes. That's where the recreation uses comes, and all these things. And so the RBA, or the Resource Benefit Alliance, was formed with the notion of having a similar arrangement here. To give you quantums, in the Peace, I believe Dawson Creek would be a fair comparison in terms of size of community. It's roughly the same size as Prince Rupert, and they get about $12 million a year in grant money that flows directly to them, which they can put to use any way they choose. It's certainly our hope that the magnitude of these payments, should the Resource Benefit Alliance come to a conclusion with the government. And there's been some real progress made by people around this table, previous council, moving this forward, bringing it to the attention. The challenge is, I mentioned the date 2014, because over the time from 2014 to today, the government changes often, the ministers change often, and so you get to a point where you think you're just about there, and then there's a change, and then you sort of slip backwards and keep going. So that's one of the reasons we're pushing hard is, and we've had tremendous support from our MLA, and we're hopeful that there will be some kind of agreement, which would not be something that would necessarily reduce the current burden on taxpayers, but would be something that could avoid any sizable future burden. We would want to dedicate that to repairing infrastructure. We'll probably be required to dedicate that to be repairing and upgrading infrastructure. But thank you, Councillor Forster, for bringing that up. Councillor Cunningham.
One quick note, I'm quite sure most people in town have seen the red sort of trolley imitation buses, and yesterday I heard a figure that 250 people came off the ship and used them.
Yes.
So that's positive for tourism here.
Yes, I had a chance to go on board. I wish Councillor Skelton Morven was here, because he was on board the first ship yesterday on my behalf, greeting and doing a plaque exchange, which is our practice with each inaugural visit of a particular ship. I go on board and greet the captain, welcome him and his ship into the territory. In both days, both today and yesterday, Chief Alex Campbell was there on behalf of local nations and welcoming them to the territory. And in speaking to the local representative for Global Ports, Kevin Costa, he was very pleased with the feedback that he was getting from guests both yesterday and today. And I'll tell you why that matters is that there are cruise ship lines that are building their schedule for next year that are watching now and will be making their decisions within the next few weeks to determine whether they'll position more ships here next year or not. So very critical time for our community, and I think the community's been doing a wonderful job. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn to close council meeting to consider under section 90 of the community charter either labor relations, employee relations, or negotiations and related discussions respecting provision of municipal service. I'm not going to read the whole thing, it's in there. Councillor Randawa, is there a second? Or Councillor Niche? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Meeting